Version 2 has introduced a ton of new characters to Wuthering Waves, not the least of which a multitude of DPS units, giving us an extensive roster of attackers to choose from, with the game also having 3 central endgame modes: Tactical Hologram, Tower of Adversity, and Wuthering Wastes. You'll find plenty of reasons to make use of your entire lineup. In fact, you're encouraged, if not flat out required to do so, on account of each attacker performing well in at least 1 or 2 of them. But if you're a new player just starting out or someone who's trying to build up their roster, I wanted to make an updated guide on the most important DPS units to aim for in Wuthering Waves. The metagame's beginning to accelerate fairly quickly, and we can expect the remainder of version 2 to tax your team building coverage more and more. I'll be choosing 5 characters and 2 honorable mentions based on which units in my opinion cover the most bases. In other words, the goal is to pick DPS characters who can excel in as many endgame modes as possible, ideally all 3. Finally, this list will not be ordered, it's not 5th to 1st place, it's just 5 across the board. Let's get started. First honorable mention will be Qinqi. Being one of the earliest 5-star attackers in the game, Qinqi was brought in substantially more powerful than just about anyone at the time. When you compare it to the likes of Calcaro, Encore, and Lingyang, they were nowhere close to measuring up to her strength. How have things held up for her now though? Qinqi's greatest asset was how easy it was to get her off the ground, considering all you needed were coordinated attacks to power up her forte circuit, an easy task to accomplish in light of Verena driving such a mechanic. Her straightforward game plan also made her easy to play, altogether making for a strong self-sufficient character. That statement remains true to this day, as she's one of the best tower and hologram attackers in the game. But due to her considerable downtime in between rotations, as well as focusing on big explosions over sustained combat, she doesn't fare too well in Whimpering, making her more of a boss killer than a wave clear. Hence why she's an honorable mention. Still a fantastic unit all things considered, and deservedly one of the best in the game even up until now, but her versatility just doesn't extend as far as her competition. Second honorable mention will be Qinqi's right-hand woman, Changli. Changli is arguably the most enigmatic unit in Wuthering Waves. She seems to always fluctuate from a middling character to a potential god tier unit, back to middling, then back to god tier depending on who you ask. Players generally look to be in agreement that Changli has the capability of being one of the best attackers in the game, with the caveat that she may also be the most complex character in the game to play and especially to master. I had half a mind to put her in the actual list of top 5, but her prohibitively skill-intensive gameplay implies you'll often run into moments where you mess up on execution, thus impacting her DPS. That being said, Changli's consistent attack patterns and good area coverage make her an excellent wave clearer, and her burst rotations can of course break through tower floors pretty competently. That being said, her performance in holograms greatly necessitates expertise, and even then her single target DPS can lag behind her peers. For that reason, while I don't consider her top 5 in a general setting, for players willing to accept the challenge of mastering her, she is well worth consideration. Okay, now that we're done with the honorable mentions, let's not waste any more time and get into the top 5. As the game's inaugural 5-star character, Jian's been holding on to his position quite impressively to say the least. Usually around midway through version 2, most version 1 units begin to feel the pressure of power creep. However, thanks to the increasing importance of AoE courtesy of Whimpering, Jian's one of the best attackers in that game mode, while still operating fantastically in tower. Definitely the best aspect about him is how self-contained he is. Jian doesn't really need any specific thing to get going. He's not like Qinqi where you need coordinated attacks, or Zani who relies on Frazzle. Any supports who can augment personal damage, namely in the form of heavy attacks or arrow damage, can be used with him. His dependence on ultimate is made up for by said ultimate being an empowered state alongside a burst nuke, making him ever so slightly more flexible than characters who get screwed over if their screen nuke fails to crit. Moreover, his rapid attack sequences mean he can parry enemy attacks without having to interrupt his rotation. I would say the biggest downside of GN is that he's functionally worthless outside of his ultimate, and so you'll have to manage cooldowns and give him as much energy as you can. Fortunately, that can be arranged, with enough investment. And on the subject of investment, he scales phenomenally for whales willing to get his later sequences. While I consider Jian and Qinqi to be on par with each other more or less, Qinqi's niche is holograms, which don't reset. Jian's niche on the other hand is Whimpering, which does reset and is overall the more valuable game mode to excel in because of that. Overall, Jian's an emblematic example of how to build a strong general attacker, although a lot of that has to do with him being the only arrow attacker in the game. When Cardathea comes out, that might change. Next character on the list will be Camellia. Little Miss Crazy Girl has been thoroughly appreciating the advent of Whimpering, as well as the inclusion of Rocha and the Nightmare Crownless Echo to her person. In a similar fashion to Jian, Camellia is a self-sufficient DPS character who doesn't rely on any specific mechanic or engine to thrive. You simply have to load her up with basic attack buffs and whatever general DPS augments you can get your hands on. In fact, she has quite the assortment to choose from. Rocha, Sanhua, Danchin, and Cantarella can all be utilized well on her, with the former being the most effective assuming you have the right equipment. Camelia's shining virtue is their incredible area coverage and consistent output. It would be no exaggeration to call her potentially the best Wuthering Waves attacker in WoA by way of her limitless uptime and strong damage output. She technically has the proper burst rotation to maximize her DPS, but Wuthering prioritizes consistency over uptime. That being said, her aforementioned burst rotation allows her to still take on tower floors at a competitive pace. Altogether though, Camelia's DPS is evenly split across her ultimate, basic attacks, and forte for a steady stream of damage. Thanks to this, she also has an easy time achieving parries without having to time her attacks. As her hold attack has so many active hits, you'll naturally interrupt enemy combos. Camelia is definitely not the best when it comes to boss killing on account of it being difficult to move around on her skill state and her rotation being on the longer end. Hologram bosses also tend to move around a lot, which could be troublesome for her since missing even one of her key attacks could compromise the others. Even so, with the help of a broad spectrum of supports, fantastic base damage, and mindlessly easy wave clearing, Camelia is a significant force in tower and almost obligatory in Wuthering, earning her a spot in the top 5. Something worth mentioning is that due to the concentrated release of Havoc units in late version 1, early version 2, they likely won't release another Havoc unit for a while, choosing instead to focus on other elements. Which means, at least for the next version or two, Camelia won't have to worry about getting power crept by a new Havoc attacker. Phoebe will be our next character in the top 5 and easily one of the most powerful units in the game from when she came out, and even more so nowadays. As the centerpiece of the Spectral Fossil mechanic, she has the unique ability to be both a damage dealer and a support depending on if you choose Absolution or Confession. That alone is a big deal. Role versatility means even if she might not be the best attacker, she can always moonlight in supportive fields. But the best thing about Phoebe is that she's one of the best damage dealers in the game too. She can even alternate between modes in the midst of battle, though you have little if any reason to do so. Seeing as we're focusing on DPS in this video, let's stay in that field. First and foremost, Phoebe's damage output is nothing short of exquisite. When sufficiently built and with a proper Frazzle party, Phoebe can easily keep up with the game's top DPS units. Reminiscent of Camelia, Phoebe's damage output is split amongst multiple parts of her kit, making it so she doesn't have to prioritize landing any one specific move, which also gives her better uptime in situations demanding pressure over power. Though her forte circuit has a fixed cooldown of 24 seconds, Phoebe doesn't have much downtime to her since you can space out her abilities and recast her skill twice in a rotation. Her first 3 sequences all assist in powering her strength even further, good for those who can invest more. In addition, unlike the first 2, Phoebe can easily work in quickswap teams, creating the opportunity for more skilled players to field her alongside Chinli for even better results. Despite being a DPS character, she carries a great utility component, her ability to stun targets with her skill for 2 seconds, a property shared amongst her and the remaining 2 units in this list. Timed correctly, it can help you escape a bad situation or delay enemy attacks enough to avoid them. It's also worth pointing out that from a cost effectiveness point of view, Phoebe might be the most free-to-play friendly character in the game since you can put together a very strong party using only one 5-star character, her. Everyone is Spectre over it, and she can use Mortafi, Sanhua, and Verena for the final slot, making her a good choice for anyone looking to get someone going right away. Better yet, however, Phoebe also has room for increased performance. The inclusion of Zani and Chakona can assist her in the upper end. Now, while her AoE coverage might have you believing she's good for Wuthering, Phoebe relies on Spectral Frazzle stacks to be applied on enemies to optimize their damage, and the only way to apply Spectral Frazzle in multi-wave is through Chakona. It's by no means enough to render Phoebe ineffective in that mode without Chakona, but it's one thing that can get in the way of performing comfortably. All in all, Phoebe's without question one of the best characters in the game in basically all 3 modes. Second to last character will be Zani. As the newest main attacker in WoA, Zani's the latest phenom around here, and unequivocally one of the best if not the absolute best depending on who you ask. If you thought Phoebe was an absolute beast of a general DPS, Zani takes that a step further. She has some of the highest damage output in the game spread amongst multiple attacks. With their main ones being considered heavy attack and Spectral Frazzle damage, you can augment her DPS through conventional means like Mortafi, but also through characters like Phoebe, Spectrover, and Chakona, since her DPS is directly tied to how many Frazzle stacks you can apply on enemies. This does come with the stipulation that Zani's party versatility isn't the highest, but given Spectral Frazzle's gotten a ton of attention as of late, it's not like you're without variety and options. Complicated as her kit may appear, Zani's actually one of the easiest characters in the game to play at a high level. She effectively auto-parries enemy attacks thanks to her block stances, enabling her to completely negate the damage of the first attack and fire right back with increased vibration reduction. Not to mention her ability to stagger enemies. Zani can do this multiple times throughout her rotation, automatically making her a strong boss killer in that she doesn't give a flying about how much damage hologram enemies can do. Her burst rotation also makes her excellent in tower floors. If you can stack up enough embers, a single Inferno mode could be all you need to one-shot just about anything and everything you run into. Zani's comparatively longer rotation actually works to her advantage in whimpering, even though one would think a long rotation time's usually a bad thing. With her attacks all having good area coverage and her being able to attack multiple times, she can effortlessly tear through waves of enemies. Additionally, main parties allow for her teammates to also pitch in. Confession Phoebe, for example, can still do enough to clear a wave while you wait for Zani's ultimate to come off cooldown. Overall though, what makes Zani so good is that she just has really high numbers. Tanking enemy hits, AoE coverage, all that stuff is good, but she just hits like a truck. There are so many ways to boost her damage that she's the best vertical investment character in Wuthering Waves at the moment. You can increase her power conventionally through units like Shorekeeper, you can boost her damage through Frazzle stacks with Chacona and Phoebe, you can give her heavy attack damage as well through Mortefi, so on and so forth. All the same, Zani may also be one of the more expensive characters to vertical invest in. Spectra is the one element without a 4-star character, not including Rover, who I consider a 4-star, and even Chacona, who can facilitate Spectral Frazzle despite being Arrow, is also a 5-star. In spite of that, the payoff makes her absolutely worth going after. Final character will be Carlotta. Though I said this video will not be ordered, if I had to choose a definitive number 1, it would be a tie between her and Zani, depending on whom else you have. First and foremost, Carlotta is bar none the best boss killer in the game. Without question, Hologram's best attacker owing to her consistency and inconceivably high DPS output, especially against one target. Just like Phoebe, Carlotta is capable of stunning bosses, giving you a nice margin of safety when fighting them. Furthermore, being a gun user, she has the longest effective range among the cast. While other units have to waste time chasing after holograms that like to fly around, Carlotta can stay put and keep firing as always. Not to mention her second skill cast has an incredibly long dash range. Her Forte circuit builds up seamlessly, and all parts of her kit from her skill to ultimate to Forte do significant damage. If you're not a fan of the whole Spectral Frazzle mechanic and prefer units with a quote-unquote normal playstyle, look no further than Carlotta. It's really hard to mess up her combos once you play her for more than 5 minutes, not just from your own mechanics but also enemies too. If and when you can execute her perfectly, enemies that can survive her entire burst rotation are few and far between. She is that strong. Having said that, though a number of her attacks can strike enemies in a cluster if they're next to each other, Carlotta is more single target oriented, naturally making her more suited for tower and holograms. However, because her DPS is spread across multiple hard-hitting strikes, chief among them being the 4 shots from her ultimate, if you have someone on the team who can group enemies for her, or the waves themselves are tightly packed already, Carlotta can still be a serviceable unit in whimpering. She falls short when compared to Camellia and Tien, but by no means is she unusable in that mode either. Carlotta also happens to be a very flexible character to build, benefiting from all manner of secondary party members. Tilta is her best complement of course, but she can still capitalize on Brant, Cantarella, Sanhua for crying out loud, which is funny, or even the likes of Yang Yang, Talchi, and Lumi. Further, because Carlotta is a hypercarry attacker, vertical investment pays off on her in spades. I don't consider her quite as free-to-play friendly as Phoebe, but she's certainly easier to get going than Zani. Hands down, a priority target if you're planning to take on Wua's endgame. And that wraps up my top 5, Chien, Camellia, Phoebe, Zani, and Carlotta with honorable mentions in Qingqi and Changli. Since Wua has multiple endgame modes, you can typically find a reason to use most DPS characters in some shape or form, so under no circumstances am I implying these are the only ones that can be viable. Brant, Yinlin, Shangli Yao, Havoc Grover, Cantarella, even Danshin for crying out loud, have their place in the meta too. But if you're looking for the best bang for your buck, I recommend these ones first and foremost. Then again, version 2.4 will be introducing Cardathia and Lupa, so definitely keep an eye out for those two. I'll put something in the pinned comment after they officially release, in the event either or both of them are good enough to replace anyone on the list. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below whether you agree or disagree with my choices, and as always, if you enjoyed the video, a like and subscribe would be much appreciated. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Vars, join my Discord server, and check out my other Wuthering Waves guides if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.